Шановні колеги, вітаю вас. Приєднуйтесь. У нас сьогодні другий день конференції. До початку залишається 2 хвилиночки. Як зазвичай, ми перевіряємо, чи добре видно, чи добре чутно, і вітаємося, пишемо, якщо є можливість, звідки ви до нас приєднуєтеся, щоб розпочати наш онлайн-захід з відчуття, наскільки ми єдині, незважаючи на те, де ми зараз знаходимося. Вітаю, місто Київ, місто Дніпро до нас приєднався, Львів, Дніпро. Через те, що ви пишете, я розумію, що мене добре чутно і добре видно. Бровари, вітаю, знову Київ, приєднується Чернігів. Пані Анна, дякую. Олександрія, місто Київ. Місто Черкаси до нас приєднується, Бердичів, Дніпропетровська область до нас приєдналася, Полтава, знову Київ. Дуже-дуже приємно всіх вас бачити, шановні колеги, Житомир приєднується. Лозова до нас приєдналася, Харків, знову Бердичів, Миколаїв, Полтава, Чернівці, неймовірно. Звідусіль приєднуєтеся ви, шановні колеги, і це дуже приємно. Запоріжжя, Одеса, Львів, Херсон приєднується до нас, Кривий Ріг, Енергодар приєднується, Чернігів, знову Кривий Ріг, Київська область, Луцьк. Це неймовірно приємно всіх бачити, приємно принаймні так об'єднати вчителів англійської мови з усіх куточків країни. У нас 15 година за київським часом, і я готова розпочинати другий день нашої конференції. Вас вітає представництво Macmillan Education. В Україні у нас другий день. Сьогоднішній наш другий день буде присвячено середній та старшій школі. Дуже швидко нагадаю вам план нашої роботи сьогодні. Після мого вступного слова у нас буде 2 спікера і 2 неймовірно корисних і цікавих воркшопа від наших тренерів і авторів, це пані Кароліна і пан Яцек. Нагадаю, що у нас завтра буде 3-й день конференції, на якому ми будемо відповідати на запитання вчителів з різних шкіл, різних регіонів, які ми зібрали і розбили ці question and answer new school year highlights на початкову школу, бо там один набір запитань, і на середню старшу школу, бо там трошечки інший набір запитань. І у другій сесії завтра ми будемо також говорити і про НУШ в 5 класах. Нагадаю, що всі учасники сьогоднішнього нашого заходу отримують сертифікати. Якщо ви були вчора на нашому заході, то хочу повідомити, що сертифікати за вчорашній день, за день перший, я вже вам відправила. І якщо ви його ще не отримали, це означає, що він міг потрапити у папку спам, тому, будь ласка, перевіряйте цю папочку. Дуже швидко нагадаю вам, так само, як і вчора, бо багато колег, хто приєднався сьогодні, вчора не були, документи, якими керується кожен вчитель у своїй роботі, і вже післязавтра ми розпочинаємо наш новий навчальний рік, це державні стандарти, їх у нас 4 наразі, за якими ми працюємо. Це стандарт початкової школи, це новий стандарт, за яким будуть працювати 5 класи і 6 пілотні, це державний стандарт середньої школи 6-9 класи і старшої школи 10-11 класи. Далі, кожен вчитель в своїй роботі керується навчальною програмою і саме за навчальною програмою складає своє календарне планування. Звичайно, вчителю потрібні підручники, за якими вона будуть працювати зі своїми учнями. І ці підручники мають бути з грифом Міністерства освіти і науки України і бути в переліку рекомендованої літератури. Також ми керуємося методичними рекомендаціями, які кожен напередодні кожного навчального року видає Міністерство освіти і науки України, і цьогоріч 19 серпня вийшли ці методичні рекомендації. Також нам знадобляться критерії оцінювання, і в початковій школі це одні критерії оцінювання, 5 класи нової української школи це трошечки інші критерії оцінювання. Про це ми також будемо завтра більш детально розмовляти. І з 6 по 11 клас це третій набір критеріїв оцінювання, тобто нам не дають сумувати. Також у нас є календарно-тематичне планування, нагадаю, ми складаємо його за навчальною програмою. І дуже важлива річ, яка з'явилася, ну, власне кажучи, вона була і раніше, але вже в нормативних документах вона з'явилася з 2020 року, коли у нас почалася пандемія. Кожному вчителю на початку навчального року потрібен так званий back-to-school kit, а саме діагностувальні роботи і матеріали для повторення навчального матеріалу. Що стосується підручників, то видавництво Macmillan Education ready for any scenario. Ми готові до будь-якого сценарію навчання, офлайн, онлайн, частково офлайн, повністю онлайн. Адже всі наші підручники мають грифи Міністерства освіти і науки України. Вони включені у перелік рекомендованої літератури на цей навчальний рік. І найголовніше, кожен підручник має унікальний код, за яким у учня і у вчителя є цифрові ресурси, які дозволяють дуже легко і дуже швидко перейти в режим дистанційного або онлайн навчання. Для учнів це Digital Books або Online Flipping Books, для вчителя це інструменти для проведення онлайн-уроків або для роботи на смарт-дошці, це Class Presentation Tools. Є ресурсні центри учня та вчителя до кожного підручника, які містять вже готові додаткові ресурси. Для вчителя є генератор тестів, окрім того, що є готові тести. Для учня є онлайн-робочі зошити або онлайн-тренажери, онлайн-практис, особливістю яких є те, що завдання всі перевіряються автоматично, учень одразу отримує перевірений результат і вчитель одразу отримує результати своїх учнів. Що стосується 5 класів, дуже швидко. На основі модельних програм нами розроблені навчальні програми, і їх можна отримати у нас, для цього треба зателефонувати або написати. Вони знадобляться тим вчителями, тим школам, які працюють за одним з наших підручників в 5 класах. Це або All Clear for Ukraine, або Gateway рівня 1+, або це підручники English World і Academy Stars, які продовжують лінійку підручників початкової школи. Коли я говорила про Ready for any scenario, я мала на увазі, що активуючи код в підручниках, всі матеріали знаходяться на онлайн-платформі, яка має назву, яка говорить сама про себе. Це Macmillan Education Everywhere. І ось так усі на віртуальній книжковій поличці і у вчителя, і у учня є все, що необхідно для проведення уроків. Це інтерактивні підручники, зошити, онлайн-тренажери або онлайн-зошити. До цих онлайн-тренажерів і зошитів у вчителя є електронний журнал класу і можливість здійснювати миттєвий зворотній зв'язок. Є аудіо і відеоматеріали, є, як я вже говорила, як готові тести, так і генератор тестів. Ну і готові додаткові завдання для учнів. Для тих, хто вперше починає користуватися в цьому році нашими підручниками, є відеоінструкції, які демонструють, як активувати код, як приєднатися учнями до класу і так далі, і так далі. Вони розміщені на нашому каналі в YouTube. Календарно-тематичне планування, про яке я говорила, воно у відкритому доступі. Його знайти дуже просто. Достатньо зайти на наш сайт macmillanukraine.com, в каталозі знайти потрібний вам підручник, натиснути календарно-тематичне планування і завантажити його. Всі календарні плани створені у форматі Word, а це означає, що ви зможете їх редагувати за потреби і під ваші потреби. Говорила про Back to School Teacher's Kit. У методичних рекомендаціях, спеціально винесла вам на слайд, говориться про те, що нам дуже рекомендують на початку навчального року виявити рівень опанування учнями навчального матеріалу за попередній рік, яким вони оволодівали в умовах воєнного стану або самостійно, або з використанням технологій дистанційного навчання. А потім за результатами цієї діагностики запровадити на початку року коригуюче навчання. І знов-таки для тих вчителів, які користуються нашими підручниками, у нас є все для того, щоб ви могли не гаяти час і здійснити цю діагностику з автоматичною перевіркою. На сайті macmillanukraine.com в розділі тестування є діагностичні тести до кожного підручника, до кожного рівня. Все, що вам потрібно зробити, це сказати учням, щоб вони цю діагностику пройшли. Ось, наприклад, до підручника Gateway для середньої та старшої школи до кожного рівня є такий діагностичний тест. Учні приєднуються до вчителя у віртуальний клас, виконують цю діагностику, отримують свій результат. Цей результат потрібен учню і вчителю і аж ніяк не виставляється у класний журнал, бо, нагадаю, мета такої діагностики – виявити рівень опанування матеріалом за попередній навчальний рік. Ось так, наприклад, я зробила скріншот, буде виглядати одне з завдань, коли учень бачить запитання, має вибрати одну з відповідей, натиснути «Далі». Коли закінчується тест, учень отримує ось таке повідомлення. Онлайн-тести зроблені таким чином, що без набраних балів неможливо його виконувати, тому певне оцінювання тут є, проте, нагадаю, ми не виставляємо у класний журнал, нам ця інформація потрібна для здійснення, для організації коригуючого навчання. У вчителя в особистому кабінеті на сайті Macmillan Ukraine є не тільки самі тести і ключі до них, а і такі методичні рекомендації, покрокові інструкції, дуже корисні, як працювати з результатами діагностичних тестів. Тобто, що далі вчителю робити, коли учні цю діагностику пройшли. Ну і що стосується коригуючого навчання, то тут також вчителі озброєні, їм не треба нічого вигадувати. Ось цей catch-up material для коригуючого навчання, він є вже інтегрований у кожен підручник. Ну, по-перше, в ресурсних центрах вчителя є матеріали для цього коригуючого навчання. І плюс у самих підручників вони починаються з welcome юнітів або starter юнітів, які якраз і містять матеріал за попередній рік або за попередні навчальні роки, який дозволяє вчителю повторити, наздогнати, заповнити якісь прогалини у знаннях учнів, які виявить діагностика. Ну, ось так, наприклад, для початкової школи виглядає один з розворотів, так для 5 класу виглядає один з розворотів цього стартер-юніта. Якщо ви працюєте у початковій школі або у 5, 6, 7 класах ви працюєте з підручником Academy Stars і ваші учні знаходяться десь за кордоном, то у нас з'явилася саме для цього підручника новинка. Це повністю цифровий варіант підручника, тобто купується код і у учня за цим кодом є підручник, робочий зошит і practice kit. Ця пропозиція, нагадаю, повторюся, дійсно тільки до підручника Academy Stars. Для решти підручників код знаходиться безпосередньо у підручнику. І завершу я таку вступну частину тим, що пропоную вам, можливо, зробити скріншоти, потім відсканувати QR-коди, слідкувати за нами на Фейсбуці Macmillan Ukraine, в Інстаграмі, долучатися до перегляду відео всіх наших заходів на каналі YouTube. І у нас з'явився нещодавно телеграм-канал, де також ви можете швидко у своєму телефоні дізнаватися новини від нашого видавництва. Тож, якщо ви ще не приєдналися, раджу зробити скріншот і потім приєднатися до наших спільнот. На цьому я зупиняю свою демонстрацію і з превеликим задоволенням переходжу на англійську мову. I'm switching into English to introduce our first speaker, Miss Carolina. Few words about Carolina, because it is not the first time that you are giving the talks for Ukrainian teachers, but probably there are teachers who haven't attended the events you conducted. So Carolina is based in Poland. She is a teacher trainer, and a co-author of a number of books for teenagers. And it seems to me it was a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, when Carolina devised for Macmillan Education a guide to distance learning, a planner. It was an amazing thing, and if anyone is interested, so please don't hesitate to contact me or my colleague Nina, and we will send you the link to this guide. And today Carolina is going to share with you and conduct a workshop about assessment in the conditions of mostly online teaching. Carolina, happy to see you, and the floor is all yours.
Okay. Thank you. To begin with, let me start with the big thank you for inviting me to the event. You have probably read. Let me start my presentation first, because it's going to be. It will help me organize my thoughts, I think. Here it is. Okay, then. So I am going to talk about assessment, but not about tests and pop-up quizzes, and not about grades. I am going to talk about learner-friendly assessment. If you have read the title before and the abstract for this presentation, I promised to focus on the why, the what, and the how of learner-friendly assessment. Once that I started preparing the presentation, I slightly changed the order. So first I will talk about the what, which is going to be combined with the why, because once I talk about what it actually is, and also a little bit about what it is not, then the why, in other words, the reasons for introducing a certain number of techniques in either classroom, be it regular classroom or online classroom, will simply emerge. And then at the end, I am going to present a bunch of techniques to be used with your students, and from the very beginning of this school year. Now, let me first explain. I just need to control the time. Okay. Let me first perhaps start talking about a popular misconception about what learner-friendly assessment might be seen as. So very often in lay terms, not for people connected with education, but in lay terms, learner-friendly assessment means no testing or easy tests or no grades, something as simple as that, okay? Hence, I've chosen these two Glasbergen's comic strips. So the first one is the square root of 9 is 3, true, false, who cares? Many students actually look forward to Mr. Atwater's math test. Another one says, why is an A or B better than C or D? Are in all letters equal in the eyes of God? At some point in this presentation, I will also try to prove they are also equal in the eyes of an average student. Okay, so basically, this is not what I mean by learner-friendly assessment. I am going to clarify what maybe one more, a few more sentences of introduction. So what I mean is not about simplifying the tests that we are using now or giving students good grades for nothing. It's all about creating such an atmosphere in the classroom, both in the regular classroom and the online one, in which learners feel positive about showing how much they have learned. Okay, so, you know, a test is not a learner-friendly situation. Okay, it is stressful, it's always problematic. Therefore, I will suggest a number of techniques or a number of tools that you can replace the test with. But before we start, I would like to sound out what you know, what you think about formative assessment, because this is what I'm going to focus on. By learner-friendly assessment, like this is, to me, learner-friendly assessment is synonymous to formative assessment. There are two things that you can do. I would like us together to create a word cloud. I'm not sure how well you know this tool, the tool Mentimeter. I will show you later on how useful it is as a formative assessment technique, but let's leave this one for later. To start with, I would like you to go to this website, either menti.com, and enter this voting code, or simply scan the QR code. And what you will see there, let me just, okay. What you will see there, okay, let me just know if you scanned the QR code there. Let's perhaps, if you can just tell me perhaps in the chat, if it was enough, plus, yeah, if you could just let me know if you managed to scan the QR code, I will know what to do next. Basically, once you go to that website, there's a question for you to answer. There are two words I'd like you to type, so it's not just choosing the answers. I'd like you to type two words that you associate with the word or with the concept of formative assessment. And there are no good or bad answers. This is not a quiz on methodology. You can either type in the numbers of techniques, but you can also write something, you know, the name of an emotion or a feeling that comes to mind when you think about, when you basically think about it. Like, you can express your likes or dislikes here, or, you know, methodological concepts that you actually associate with formative assessment. And okay, I think hopefully most of you have managed to scan the code, because I want to leave this presentation and look at how beautifully our word cloud is. Okay. Oh, how beautifully our word cloud is. Oh, come on. Oh, how beautifully our word cloud is growing, and I hope it's going to work.
Carolina,
yes.
we can't see your word cloud.
Yes, this is, I'm going to change the, this is actually, I just wanted to, okay, share screen and share now this, and this should be shared. Can you see it now? Okay, present. Come on. Okay, can you see what's going on the screen now?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So let's wait for more answers. So far, only 17 of you have submitted their answers. I know that there are 200 of you, so please give me more, because hopefully, you know, some interesting things are going to happen. So if you could please add a little bit more. See, I can kind of scrutinize it, how many people are answering, because this is where in the top right corner, I actually see the number of responses. Okay, 19, better. Come on, we need to get at least 30, please. Perhaps, okay, guys, I will show you, okay, is it possible perhaps that you didn't, some of you are writing here, feedback, okay, can you, these are very good answers. Could you possibly write it in this? I'm going to show you this code one more time, or you can go to www.menti.com and use this voting code, okay? Or would you like me, perhaps, you will have to write it in the chat box then, or Ina, perhaps you could tell me, would you like to see the QR code again? Because we need to, marks, achievement, progress, support, sharing, jeering. Okay, okay, anybody else? 20 people, give me more, give me more. Yes, okay, guys, whoever is there, please, you can continue submitting, and I'm going, new share. I'm going to show you the code one more time, and it is here. So you can scan the QR code with your phone, and perhaps more of you will able to submit their answers. Yeah. Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay. Anybody? Yeah, support feedback. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to look at my word cloud one more time. Okay, let's see if it gets any bigger. 26 people. Okay, let's have a look. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the tool. Basically, the number that the answers that are the most common are the biggest. So it basically means that a lot of you, the 28 people who actually managed to submit their answers, mentioned there were many answers such as motivation, support, progress. Okay, that means that most of you, for many of you, formative assessment means motivation, it means support, and means progress, because these are the biggest. In other words, these 3 words were mentioned the most often. Let's see what else is here. No marks, motivating. No marks, not necessarily, and I hope I will refer to it in a moment. Okay, formative assessment perhaps is no marks, or like explaining where the mark comes from in student language. This is what I would say. We've got grades, we've got shaping, we've got emojis, investigation. This is a good one. This is a good one. Sharing, continuous, nicely put. Ready-made, okay, motivate. So see, motivation, motivate, motivating. This is endless process. Nice. Achievement, observation, very nice. Hopes, weekly quizzes, possible. Although again, in formative assessment, you will need to see what to do with that quiz later on, or how to prepare it, because the same quiz, and I will show you how it works in a moment, can be at the same time just a regular test that, you know, students don't like, or it can, if depending on what we do with it and how we go about it in the classroom, both online and offline, it can become a learner-friendly assessment tool. Okay, persuade, easy. See, I wouldn't go with easy. One of the things that I am going to mention is that for assessment to be formative, it has to include or somehow comment on the student's effort. If you give students an easy task and then you give them a very good mark for it, they're not going to feel good about themselves, right? Okay, thank you very much for that. We are going to use this tool one more time today at the end of this, slides. Okay, at the end of this presentation as a finishing kind of activity. But I have one more time for you. I'd like you to think about the following, okay? The first question was from the perspective of the teacher. Now this one is from the perspective of a learner. If you were a learner, would you feel all fine if, and now you can get me just plus or minus in the chat box, okay? Would you feel fine if the teacher gave you a test to do at home. Anybody? F for fine, N for not fine. Anyone? Fine or not fine? How would you feel about it? Fine, of course. Yeah, right? This would definitely make me as a learner feel fine. Number 2, you got a task, a 5. 5 is the best mark in Poland, so that's why I put the 5 here. You've got the top mark for a task into which you have put very little effort. Would you feel fine? Or rather cheeky? Fine. Not really. I mean, the thing is like, okay, it's like, that was easy. It was easy to, like, I kind of cheated the teacher, right? Not really. Would you feel fine if you were to create a few test tasks for the next test? So the teacher says, okay, next week, we're going to write a test. Please write 2 tasks for it. Fine, fine, not fine. One person, fine, not fine. Okay. Cheeky, yeah, but cheeky, but fine, right? Look, would you feel fine if you were to create, the next one, if you could decide what to include in a test? In other words, the teacher said, okay, so guys, let's see which of that material is maybe too difficult to be included in the test. Of course, fine, yes. Let me just, I hear that was fine, of course. That was fine, yeah. And would you feel fine if your parents asked you, did you get any marks every day? I mean, you come from school and they're like, did you get any marks? Did you get any marks? Of course not, right? It's about like, there are so many other things happening at school, you know, that this is the grades are not the most important. Would you feel fine if you got a test back with a comment, practice vocabulary? And you're frustrated? Yeah, no. Of course not. Why not? Because no student knows what practicing vocabulary actually is. So I was like, guys, go home and practice vocabulary for the next test. So the question is, so what does it mean? What does it mean, practice vocabulary? Am I supposed to learn them by heart? Am I supposed to do some activities? What does it mean? And now I was asking about this fine thing because, as you can imagine, the F here stands for formative assessment, okay? So formative assessment is, among other things, allowing students to prepare bits and pieces of the test, responding to students' effort, and not only their final, you know, not only the language, not only the tasks, okay? So kind of up to now, I was trying to show you, like, more or less in which direction the formative assessment goes, right? Now, I want to actually define it, okay? Not that much of theory, but let's try to define it. Formative assessment is very often, it's usually juxtaposed with summative assessment, right? In other words, the formative assessment is kind of the low-stake, sorry. Formative assessment is low-stake testing. So in other words, if there's little at stake, students don't get much to lose. So even if they don't perform very well, it doesn't really decide about the future, about their final grades and things like that. So summative assessment, right, which summarizes bigger periods of time or bigger periods of education, you usually have something to lose. This kind of assessment is more important. In other words, it's called high-stake testing because, you know, if you fail, then you get a worse mark in your certificate. Or take exams into take exams, for example. If you don't pass this one, you cannot proceed to the next level of education, and so on. So basically, the first one, those tests, the summative assessment high-stake test, is normally known what we refer to as evaluation, right? It's traditional, it's graded, it's kind of long-term. These are progress tests, semester tests, end-of-year tests, and so on. For students, they are very stressful, but also they are kind of important. So yeah, they do decide, they potentially they may decide about a learner's future educational career. Formative assessment, on the other hand, like I said before, is learner friendly. It is low-stake testing. It's ongoing. You don't need a test to sound out how much your learners have remembered from the previous lesson. It's informal. It doesn't have to end with a grade. This is you obtaining information about your learner's progress. Very often, like I said, in an informal way, it's individual. It's not that every single student has to receive the same test, right? You can also, informative assessment, you can take into account the amount of effort put into the task by every student. If you've got a student who is struggling, right, like the underachiever, right, and he finally writes an essay or a letter, like a written assignment, he or she hands it in on time, and it is written with very basic language, but it's fairly accurate. Yeah, very basic language, right? And let's say there are 5 mistakes. So what about if the same, but this is an underachiever. This is a student who has been struggling for the last 2 years, let's say. How about a student, how about a situation in which the same paper is handed in by a student who is, top of the class? And there are no mistakes, but it is written in such simple language that, clearly there was no effort behind it. Would you evaluate or assess this particular written paper in the same way? Well, unfortunately, summative assessment and testing does not really allow you to differentiate between the two, but formative assessment does. You can write a different comment and give different feedback to each of these students. That's why formative assessment is very much individual. Short term, so it's usually, on the lesson to lesson basis, and it's supposed to be encouraging by being learner friendly. So now let me give you examples of some evaluation situations. And again, you can write me in the I'm going to read it out. If you could please write the answer in the chat box, if it's S summative or F formative. Students write a quiz on present simple. And it's a quiz, a test on present simple. It's just a quiz. It's just a test. It's more like summative. You guys, you look at summative, exactly. You write, you kind of introduce present simple. Students write a quiz, and then you, by quiz, guys, oh Jesus, maybe this is what by quiz, it's not like a Kahoot quiz or I don't know, Quizlet. By quiz, I mean a pop-up quiz, a pop-up test, a short test in the classroom. This is what I mean here. So maybe this is, right? So it's clearly summative. Okay, the next one. Students quiz each other, and hereby quiz each other on new vocabulary. So they work in pairs, and they said, okay, so what is this? And what is this? And how would you translate this? Of course, Tatiana was the first one, formative. Okay, the next one. Students write a test on present simple for their friend. Formative, again, Olga was the first one, I guess. This is right. Whether you mark it or not, you can mark it, but you don't need to give any grades. This is clearly formative because it includes a grade. It is based on peer assessment. Okay, the next one. Students use the key to check their answers and grade their own work. Formative, exactly. Instead of the teacher checking all the answers in a test, you just give the answer key and said, do it for yourselves. I don't need the grades. What I'm particularly interested in is for you to learn. Another one, making observations as students do speaking tasks. You walk around the classroom, writing all mistakes on sticky notes to be given out to students at the end of the lesson. Victoria, the first answer comes from Victoria, formative. And the last one, write a letter to your friend about a holiday adventure. Use past simple. What do you think this will be? Summative, summative, summative. Sounds like summative. But in a moment, I'm going to show you that this, whether it's summative or formative assessment, depends on how you react to it. If you mark it in red, you correct all the mistakes, you give students a B at the end, and you give it back. This is formative, this is summative assessment. Both, yes, someone wrote both. If, however, you write positive, meaningful feedback, perhaps you ask students to do something about it, then you change this whole experience into formative assessment. So basically, what I want to show you is that in assessment, it's not, okay, assessment, it's not so about assessment. Formative assessment, it's not so much about assessment, right? The formative, if you look at this term, see, formative is more important, forming good habits, right? So introducing bits and pieces of formative assessment in the classroom helps you, right? Formative is more important than assessment. And it helps you change the testing experience to learning experience. In other words, most of the teaching technique or the formative assessment tools will help students or will boost students' language proficiency or will help them develop linguistically. This is one thing. And another thing that I want to tell you is that, in fact, most of these techniques are things that, or are tools that we have already been using in our classrooms for a very long time. So, you know, I've been told that in Ukrainian schools, formative assessment becomes a big deal now, yes? So hopefully after this session, whoever asks you about how you go about formative assessment in your classroom, be it online or offline, you will be able to point to at least 3 or 4 techniques that, let's face it, you use it on an everyday basis and you've been using them for a long time. All you need to do is see them as formative assessment tools and not only as language tasks, okay? I think basically that's, if I may digress here, that's the privilege of English teachers, right? Kind of the English teaching methodology or English as a foreign language methodology has been quite well for a while now. And we have all been quite, you know, innovative in whatever we do. So like I said, you will see in a moment that probably most of the techniques you have been using in your classroom. So summing up this part, formative assessment is not a replacement for grades, is not synonymous to descriptive evaluation. So it doesn't mean that you change grades into, you know, writing comments or full comments about the learner. The register is still there, the grades are there, semester grades, end of year grades are there. It's not, because basically formative assessment is not about, it's not so much about evaluation, how much students have mastered. It is feedback on students' current performance on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis, which helps you to look into the future. In other words, okay, of course, like, it also, as a result, if you sound out how much students already know and what works for them and so on, and how good they are at different things, you also kind of look into the past. I mean, if not directly, then indirectly. But on the basis of this, you know where to go next and what to do in the future, how to plan my next lesson, okay? So also formative assessment about the teacher's attitude, okay? Because as you can see, the same quiz, even a test or a written assignment can become either a summative assessment or formative assessment, depending on what you do with it. So it's all about the learner-friendly, the teacher attitude that is learner-friendly. It's a bit about giving up the student's authority. So you're not the only person in the classroom who has to do all the tests and all the quizzes and check all the tests and all the quizzes. It's about promoting learners' responsibility, let them evaluate themselves and other teachers. And of course, it's learner-friendly. So the goal of formative assessment isn't to assess whether or not students have mastered the ultimate objective, but to keep the fingers on the pulse of students' thinking to make sure that they are on the right path. So what I really like to call formative assessment is not assessment of learning, but assessment for learning. Okay. Let us take a look at what actually, how to go about it in the classroom. What are the basic kind of strategies here? So, okay, first of all, it's all about creating this growth fixed mindset classroom culture, okay? Let me tell you an example how this summative versus formative assessment actually works in practice. We have I'm pretty sure you are familiar with the concept of fixed versus growth mindset. The fixed mindset basically says, like in very simple terms, if you're intelligent and good at something, you will be intelligent and good at something, right? Growth mindset says, no, it doesn't work like that. Your performance from task to task may change depending on how much effort you put into it, okay? So now let me give you an example, something that I'm not very proud of, but hey, we are among friends here, so I think I can say it out loud. For the last few months, I've been a reviewer for some teaching materials, okay? The idea is that I review like lessons that are written by a bunch of authors. And, you know, the name of the author is usually written on the first page of those materials. And let me tell you what happened. I suddenly realized that I tend to get better lessons and better materials from certain teachers, from certain authors, okay? So, you know, and at some point I caught myself thinking, okay, so I read the name and said, here we go. You know how bad this is? I felt very bad about this. And the moment I realized what I was doing, I just stopped looking at the first page so that I don't know what the author is, so that the author of the work that I receive does not distort my, or does not influence my judgment at all. You can do the same thing as a form of formative assessment. This is actually a technique that works better in the offline classroom. So in the regular school, you can ask students to submit their papers with nicknames, right? You could, for instance, ask students to write their name and the nickname on a separate piece of paper and then write the test or written assignments like essays, letters, whatever it is, signed with a nickname. So that's strategy number one, not to get, I'm missing a word, not to get balanced, or right, to not to be, I'm missing a word, prejudiced. This is the word that I was going to say, not to get prejudiced. Another one is to involve pupils in planning, make them responsible for the learning. It's not that you give the test, you give them assignment, you evaluate them, let themselves evaluate their own performance and the performance of fellow students. We need to give them clear objectives. We need to provide students with success criteria, okay? Another two strategies will be self and peer evaluation and providing valuable feedback. And I am going to explain what that valuable feedback is in a moment. Before I do it, however, let me tell you how I first met with formative assessment. I joined a school. It was long after my studies, I would say 7 years, maybe 6. And I joined a school as a faculty member, so I was the teacher. And the school kind of operated on the formative assessment procedures. And I remember that the principal said that she would come and evaluate my lesson. And I've got a request that please prepare a lesson scenario based on formative assessment principle. I was like, okay, so what is this, right? I started asking my fellow teachers, my colleagues, and they said, don't worry. The most important thing that you have to do is not to call students by name, but choose the popsicles. One of the techniques for formative assessment is that you've got popsicles with the students' names on it, and instead of picking and choosing the students to answer yourself, you choose randomly the name of the student from a box or a cup with to decide who is going to speak. Okay, this is one of the most famous techniques. It does make sense because the research showed that, or classroom observation showed that teachers have a tendency to pick and choose the same students over and over again. So all of us have our very favorite students, apparently, who we ask much more often than others. So those popsicles actually there is some kind of rationale behind it. I think that if this happened to me this year or last year, something else would be advised. Do you know this tool, We'll Decide? Well, basically, and this is the equivalent of popsicles for online education, right? So you can choose the type of, this is one of the classroom screen. Okay, I use We'll Decide. Oh, sorry. I want to not too early. As you can see, I've written the. I'll show you how it works. Basically, it's for choosing students. Okay. It's for choosing students to work in pairs, to work in groups. Let me just wait. On the side, and then it goes here. Sure. Can you see the screen? I hope you can. Right. So who goes first? I wrote down the names of. See. So basically, you can easily modify the wheel. Write the names of your students. Philip will be the person who answers my next question. As a form of online tool for choosing the names of people, you can also use it for students to form pairs to work in breakout rooms, right? Sorry, let me change the share. So basically, I guess that this would be the equivalent of the We'll Decide would be the equivalent of popsicles in the classroom. This is what I wanted to say. But let's face it, there is much more than the popsicle and choosing the names, okay? So other techniques that are very common are different traffic lights. Say green, yellow, and red, like in the traffic lights, stand for different level of understanding. Green, I can do this. Yellow, getting there. Red, I need help, okay? You can easily mark some kind of color. I'm not sure which tool you use for your online education, but students can, write a green, yellow, not write, just post or send an emoticon, an emoji of a green heart or red heart or yellow heart, depending on how much they understand what you have just explained in the chat box, right? Whichever tool you work with, there is always a chat box. So this is one thing, signaling with different colors what is, you can also ask students if, again, depending on what kind of online tool you're working with, to choose different backgrounds, okay? You can ask students to choose a green background if they can move on to another task. You can ask students to choose a yellow background if they still need extra explanation. And perhaps you can ask students to choose the red background if they would like you to go to a separate breakout room with you for more explanation, while at the same time the other group of students receives the next task. So these are the traffic lights. The next one, what stuck with me today? This is like a summary tool, okay? That's just one of many possible things that students write something on the pop-up, post-it notes. Obviously, it's for regular classroom. In a moment, I will show you, at the end of the day, I will show you what else can be done as a form of this, the so-called exit ticket. And a very important thing is WALT or WILT. We usually speak of WILT. That's what I'm looking for, or what we are learning to. So telling students exactly what this particular lesson is all about. students need to be informed about what their objective for this lesson or for a series of lessons or for the unit is. Okay, and a very important, so this is basically where we're going to stop. I will now show you basically how all of these operate in the classroom, okay? So formative assessment in the language classroom, if done correctly, can both boost students' language development, I will show you how, and also help students to develop life skills, right? And, you know, this is, these days, this is extremely important. Let us start with boosting this language development. There are three major things that we can do in the classroom. This is valuable feedback, give students valuable feedback. We can provide students with all the alternative assessment techniques, and we can, or we should really, in order to, you know, as a form of, as a way of, as a kind of formative assessment strategy, introduce some good lesson planning techniques. Let us start with valuable feedback. Now, what is that valuable feedback actually is? Let's say to your students, you mark test, you mark some tests. One student, there are two different students, each of them gets a B-. What do you think happens with it? Well, the answer will be nothing. In Poland, we are obliged to keep the bigger tests, the progress tests, as a form of record for later. So if these are the tests that you give your students and then you collect them, you will keep them in your own folder. If, however, this is like a pop-up quiz, a short test, maybe a written assignment, students get it, they kind of crease it usually, and they shove it into their bags. And basically this is it. Another problem with this kind of marking is that nobody really knows if this B- is the same as the other B-. And students will never ask that question unless they are forced to. In other words, if two students will get a B-, one of them perhaps did not do the vocabulary section well, the other one had major problems with vocabulary, right? So they're both getting the same mark means absolutely nothing. The problem is that without valuable feedback, students will never ask that question. They will just move on, right? So the question is, how do we do it, or what to do to change that valuable feedback into something obviously positive, because it has to be learner friendly, but also fair and meaningful. And this is what we can do. I will now show you how to go about it on the basis of, you know, one lesson from Gateway. It is for developing writing. Let's take a look at what's inside this particular lesson. There is basically, it's a description of a play. So students are describing, and there are three model tests. They describe a perfect room, a perfect bedroom. Some of the language tasks in this lesson include work with a partner, tell them which bedroom you like, and explain your decision. So I like Charlie's because I like music. I like the cinema bedroom because, yes, I love films. So giving the reason. Then another task would be on the basic word order. Adjectives usually come something. Adjectives usually come after or before adjectives. Before verb to be and before or after the noun they describe. And then the task goes as follows. An English magazine wants teenagers to describe their ideal bedroom. Write an article about your ideal bedroom. Include information about the furniture and other objects. Right, and then 7b says, write your article. Remember to check the word order in your description. And now one of the students gives you this. Let's take a look. My ideal bedroom is quite big. There are pink walls and pink desk because I like pink. I sit often at the desk. I also have a bed huge in my room. Next window, I often have a bed huge in my room next window. My friends come often to my bedroom and we spend fun there. As you can see, it's not particularly accurate, is it? But so ideally, we spend fun there. we spend fun there, okay, next to the window and so on. However, there are only two types of mistakes that I would actually focus on. And this is the word order, because this was what students had clearly written in the task. To me, the two, and this is formative assessment, or this is applying the rules and the procedures from formative assessment into checking students' written assignments. These are the two most problematic things here for me. I sit often and they come often, because this is what the whole lesson is about. This is the language objective. I would, however, comment very positively about the use of because. Mind you that it's like, suddenly, the student who is at an A1 plus level, because this is the book is A1 plus, so that was from A1 plus Gateway, suddenly composes a longer sentence, okay? So a double sentence really, okay, or double clause. So, or coordinate clause really. So, or subordinate. This one I wouldn't, probably subordinate clause, but okay, do you understand? So this is basically what I would comment on if this was written by my student. Another example of valuable feedback. Let's say you ask your students to do this. You ask students to write comprehension questions to a text in the student's book. What would you do if a student wrote this? And let me again give you an example. This one is from Gateway, the second one, A2, right? And this is the woman inventor, Mary Anderson. And she says, windscreen wipers are invented by an American woman called Mary Anderson. And there's a short story. And some students, or one student writes this. When Mary Anderson left New York, and who was made automatic wipers? Because the last sentence here says that in 1917, the first automatic windscreen wipers were also designed by another woman, because the Mary Anderson did not, she invented just wipers, not automatic ones. And this is my question for you. Would you accept this answer or not? Plus or minus, yes or no? No answers, really? Yes. Okay. Both. Exactly. These are perfectly good comprehension questions. The task for the student was not make two questions that are grammatically correct. Yes? The question was read the text and understand it well enough or deeply enough to be able to write a question. So both of these are actually acceptable. What about correcting? I would not correct it, not at this point. I would maybe rephrase it. Okay, so let's say that you do this online. Each student has to, you can divide students into you can put them into two different breakout rooms. You can use the wheel decide, because as you can see here, let me just go backwards. Here, see? There are 4 different inventors, so you can divide the class into four groups. You can also, like I said, put them into 4 different breakup rooms in bigger groups, and then ask students to type their questions in the chat box. If you read this, like when Mary Anderson, okay, anyone, so when did Mary Anderson, they're very good question, when did she leave New York? What we are looking for really is not perfect grammar, but the answer to that question and extracting the correct information from the text. Yeah. So when it comes to correcting, what I would go for in this situation would be to rephrase it or reformulate it, but I wouldn't focus on deep grammar and so on. Okay, another question. You've just introduced present perfect. You ask students to talk all right about their shopping experiences. Some students do the whole activity in past simple, like I never bought secondhand clothes. I never was in outlet shop. I never wore boots to school. What would you do about this? Correct. Accept plus, not accept minus. Oh Jesus, I'm running out of time. Accept answers plus, not accept minus. What do you think? Minus. Okay, now I'll tell you something. It all depends what you guys tell them to do. If you tell students clearly, like in this example here, it's from Gateway, complete the sentences about your partner using the affirmative or negative form of present perfect, you can expect it, and this should be corrected. If, however, at the end of the lesson you say, okay, so now guys, for the next lesson, or please type me or send me some sentences about your shopping experiences, and you forget to mention the present perfect, then basically this is your problem what to do about it, because you did not clearly said, and here comes another formative assessment criterion, success criteria. Oh yeah, so you did not clearly mention the will, in other words, what you will look for. Students, in order for feedback to be valuable, students have to know that. One more question. Oh, Jesus, I'm so running out of time. I need to speed up. Now, for also, so this is what valuable feedback is, yes? You have to be fair and you have to refer. It has to talk about what the students were actually supposed to do. Another great feature of valuable feedback is if it changes into a language task. So assessment becomes formative when it gives practical and explicit advice about how to improve it. Let me show you how to do it. This is again a letter that you received from your learners. Thank you for your letter. It's good that you like New York. I always was happy there too. I want that you come and visit my family. If you will come, I will show you my city. And obviously you can just write and, you know, change everything and correct all the mistakes. You can, however, not change it and not correct it, just underline the mistakes, okay? And this is feedback. This is not correction, this is feedback. This is the feedback that basically changes your writing into process writing. Because what happens with the learners now? Okay, well, okay, there is a mistake there. Go and change it, right? If you want to make it even more formative assessment style, you would do it in green and not in red, because this is how we, and this also works for any kind of, you can, when you get students' papers from online, you can always write comments and edit the document instead of just, or mark the mistakes and not correct them. And that would be something that I would write. Good job. Your letter, for example, included all the information, you know, in the task, or follow the instructions, or your letter was nice to read simply. Now, please rewrite the letter, correcting the mistakes underlined, and add 2 more sentences so that, you know, it becomes longer, more sophisticated, more advanced, so that basically it changes into a student, into a task. Okay, then. This is valuable feedback. Now let us have a look at some alternative assessment techniques. Basically, alternative assessment techniques is all about, like, this is the answer to one question. If not a test, then what? We already said the test, that summative assessment in general is very stressful for students. In other words, you know, it's, how shall I put it? Not every student feels comfortable with writing tests. So let's give them a chance to present their knowledge in a different way. As a result, you will, in order to do that, you need to enrich your repertoire and give the right to show knowledge. Like, this is all about giving the right to show knowledge, giving the students the right to show knowledge in many ways. And then you can also give yourself some time off. Let me see how it works. Basically, assessment focuses on or incorporates 3 different areas. The content, so it's what's in the text, the criteria, so what kind of tasks or you know, language content is there, and of the content, the criteria, and then marking. And all of these can actually go into the hands of the learners. So the student can devise their own test, they can mark the test for their students, they can mark their own tests, they can devise the criteria for what is correct and what is not. Let me show you, and I'm not sure if I told you about this one, but this is the technique that I devised at some point, and I'm very proud of myself, to be honest. And I talk about it quite willingly. So you will probably agree with me that irregular verbs is something that we teach every single year, right? To every single group of students. It's like every student learns irregular verbs every single year, I would say. Okay. So normally, instead of telling my student, normally I used to, right, just give them a list and tell students, okay, now go and learn them by heart. But I figured it out that, well, there's nothing formative. There's nothing formative about it. So let me show you what I did with those irregular verbs, which included self-assessment, peer assessment. Students were responsible for the content and the criteria. So to begin with, I put my students into pairs. You can put them into breakout rooms and tell them, okay, now guys, from this list, you can choose 10 verbs that are not going to be on the test. So choose 10 verbs that you think, I don't know, are too difficult, you don't know how to, this is up to you. And students discuss it. So which one do we sing, sang, sang? No, maybe it's easy. So maybe shine, shone, shone. Yeah, maybe let's cross out this one because it's too difficult, and so on. And they gave me a list of verbs that we both agree will not appear on the test. And, you know, there's no way for me to break that rule, okay? So I give students that irregular verbs list to study without the 10 words, obviously. Then a week later, they come to school and I give them a template. This is what my tests usually look like. Yes, I always give one of the 3 forms. So I ask students to kind of pair up and write a test like this in this form for their friend. Then they switch their papers and everyone has to add, you know, or fill in the missing words in the table. And then they swap papers again and students check their friend's work. See? So this is how it combines peer and self-assessment, and also the content and the criteria come from the learner. What I gain with it is that, you know, I make sure that I don't tell my students, now go study and, you know, be ready with it for next week for the test. What I do is like, and this is what formative assessment is all about, enabling students to be at their best, okay? Showing things like, instead of telling them, okay, learn it for next week, it's like, okay, let's learn it together. Let's study it together. And this is one of the alternative things. Like I said, it's something that I'm very proud of, so I often talk about it. I hope that I haven't talked to you about it yet, and you didn't have to listen to it again. Now, another group of alternative assessment techniques will be peer assessment. What can we do? You can tell students to write tests for one another. Like, if students have trouble doing this, you can give them a template of a test, kind of write 5, I don't know, names of clothes, translate something into English, write 3 sentences in like before present perfect. Students can dictate the words to one another, okay? Students can, if they work, that would be good for regular classroom, or maybe for breakout rooms as well. You can ask students to, students can ask each other to describe photographs from the unit they are currently doing from the book. This is something that I'm going to skip because I'm running out of time, and there are other things I want to show you. The best peer assessment tools that you can imagine is Kahoot and Quizlet, right? Groups can create work for other students. You can even ask students to, you know, do a quiz for the whole class, or you can do it for the whole class. For the whole class as a kind of homework, okay? So like every week, one pair is responsible for preparing a Kahoot quiz or a Quizlet test for the whole class to begin the lesson with, okay? Self-assessment. You can see this cat here that looks like a lion. basically, this is the idea of formative assessment as a self-assessment as a form of formative assessment, to show students how much they have learned and how good they are. One of the techniques is all about comparing your skills. What I used to do with my students, and that was like cat and pet group, is like unfortunately, this is not the best quality photo, but it was the only one that I had. I give my students a text to read at the beginning of the school year and to underline all the words that they understand. And then 6 months later, I give them exactly the same test. And obviously I keep the first version with me. Then 6 months later, I give them the same text and I ask them to do exactly the same thing. Underline what you actually understand. And the amount of highlighted text, or the number of highlighted words, always goes up. Again, you can tell students to work on the text at home and remember one definition. Translate one sentence from the text into Ukrainian. Look what happens as a form of, like, again, it's something about signing up. Formative assessment helps students boost language development, because it's also a very good revision tool. So let's say that after a reading lesson, after an online reading lesson, you ask students to choose one sentence from a text and translate it into Ukrainian. And the next, as homework, right? It basically means that students have to look into the book again and choose something and do some kind of work. And then on the next lesson, you ask now, so guys, type the sentences in the chat box. And this is a very nice warm-up activity. And it's also a kind of formative assessment tool. Another thing will be to take tests home. I love it. Like, my students used to really like it a lot. So what it means, like a testing situation, a summative testing situation online, well, let's face it, is not it's not an ideal situation. But let's not be afraid of giving students, like normally you would give students to take home, just send them a test and allow students to send it back whenever, within, I'd say within 2 days. Why do I do tests at the end of the day? Yeah, I do need marks in the register, obviously, but the most important thing about testing is that it makes students revise. So whether it's a test that students do in their own time, even using the books and even using a Google Translator, it's something that helps them study and progress, right? You can also ask students to study the answer key. What I like to do here is put students into breakout rooms or allow them to work in pairs in a regular classroom, and give students random order of answers, for students to match with the questions. Or you can give the answer key split between students to share. Or you can write the answer key either on the board or in the Google form, so that students can so that the marking is done by the students. But what happens there is that they actually have to reread everything that is there in the text, instead of just looking at, okay, B-, off we go. Okay, so at the end of the day, we do achieve what we want, even if it's just, for students to, and this is what I want to ask you. In Gateway, you've got a perfect tool or a perfect material for using that kind of peer assessment, as self-assessment and self-quizzing, and to change like the whole page, every single unit to change into formative assessment. This is grammar revision. Okay, so like a ready-made test is there that can actually be filled in together in pairs in breakout rooms. For example, perhaps one group, one pair may check the work of another pair. Okay, students can share it also online. The most important thing is that they process the same language material several times. And yes, you can give students a good mark for effort at the end of the lesson. Why not? Okay, This is what learner-friendly assessment is all about. It helps you study, it provides you like extra language input, and not necessarily gives you a grade. And very briefly, I promise I'll try to finish really quickly. Lesson planning, which is the final part of online assessment. This is something that I already mentioned, that is the wants and wills, right? In other words, apart from this, like dealing with success criteria, so students have to know what exactly will be assessed in each particular task. Wants and wills will also help you set up language objectives, both for the teacher, right, who knows what he wants to achieve, and then for the learner who knows what he or she is supposed to learn. How can we determine how much? Because the first step about lesson planning is not, you can have your own agenda, but at the end of the day, you work with people. We have to find out how much students already know. Okay, so so that actually that planning in the learning process makes sense. For regular classroom, one of the most common things, one of the most basic things is, let's say you start a module or start a lesson about sport. You ask students, so how many words connected with sport or sport discipline you already know? And you write them on the board with one color. And then as the words appear during the lesson, you add them to the list in a different color. This also obviously works mainly in, not only, it works with, regular whiteboard or a blackboard in the classroom, but you can do exactly the same thing with Google Forms, right? You can ask students to type in short answers, right? The good thing about Google Forms is that it's a document that is co-authored, so a number of people can submit their answers. Another way of finding out how much, another way of finding out how much students already know is to use the Mentimeter, the thing we started with today. There are different options. I really recommend this tool. It doesn't have to be very cloud. There are some multiple choice tests and ranking tests and scales there too, something that I was really hoping to do with you at the end of the lesson, but not the lesson, sorry, the session. But I know I'm running out of time, so I'm just telling you about it because this is a great thing for lesson planning, to sound out how much they already know. Another example, look at this one. Look at this one. You start a new unit. This one, I don't remember if it's Gateway A1 or A1 Plus or A2. I don't remember at this moment. Sorry. What is important here? Look, you've got two sets of verbs, two sets of nouns here, right? You can ask students using the traffic light technique, or in other words, you can ask students at the beginning of the lesson to go over these two lists and underline the words they already know. This is the same technique. This actually can be used on both online and offline. Another great tool for starting the lesson with, to sound out how much students know, is to create mind maps. At coggle.it and getmind.com, you will find tools that will allow you to create different mind maps. Okay, there are different, these two are free online tools. There are other like mind map, they are paid, so this is basically up to you. But co-sharing and co-creating a mind map at the very beginning of the lesson, this is it. This is about lesson planning, starting out with, deciding how much students already know. What is it? Could you please, the audio for this, okay, so I don't, okay. Okay, I'm sorry, got distracted, thought it was, I think we're going to refer to it in a moment, okay? And another one, again, based on Gateway, every single unit ends with a language checkpoint. What you can do, of course, is go through it at the end of the lesson, but you can use at the end of the unit, but you can also start the unit with it. And you can tell students, using the traffic lights technique, to highlight the things they already know, and the things they don't know. This again works both with online and offline lesson. It basically what I think students, if they have done it, they will have to show it to you in the screen, what it basically looks like. Lesson planning is all about, like so far, the things we said about lesson planning is what to start the lesson with. You know, if we plan something, we also need to find out how it ended, okay? One of the techniques of finding out how much, or making students think about the content of the lesson one more time, is to ask them to write tweets, okay? So in other words, write 2 sentences about what you have learned, okay? And they can tweet. You can, you can even have your own, you can have your own messenger group, or you can have your own WhatsApp group, at the end of which students, make a short comment. Today I've learned this, that, okay? Other important tool, and there is, for this one, you would have to use either a regular dice or an online tool that, provides you with this roller. We'll decide will be helpful again, depending on how many, what number you have on your dice. You have to finish this sentence. If it's 1, I want to remember something. If it's 2, something that I learned today. 3, one word to sum up what I learned is, and so on and so forth. Something I already knew, and so on. See, so this is, you can do it with we'll decide in an online lesson. You can put the wheels on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then at the end of the lesson, you've got, you roll the wheel once, and then every single student has to write a sentence, as shown in the example, as shown in the template, in the chat box, as a form of a lesson summary. Mainly, this is something that students give you. And again, the idea of lesson planning and making sure that you reach the lesson objectives is to ask students to give you an exit ticket as they go out of the classroom. Such exit tickets can also be done in an online form, maybe not in this form. It has to be something editable, right? Something that students can actually write on. Although I personally believe that for online education, tweets and rolling the dice and the summary sentences will be much better and useful. This is it. I hope that I managed to show you that, first of all, formative assessment is not so much about assessment. It's all about forming good learning habits. It's all about helping students or allowing students to show their knowledge in the way that suits them, okay? So if they don't like the tests, let them speak in front of you, for instance. And as a byproduct, all of these life skills develop as well. There is risk-taking because if students know they are not judged all the time, but they are not evaluated like with grades for everything that they say or write, they will take risks, linguistic risks more willingly. They develop critical thinking, they take responsibility for their own learning with self and peer assessment. They learn to listen to others, They acquire a number of different learning techniques and also formative assessment is all about cooperation and not competition. And I wanted you to sum up this webinar with one of these sentences, but I know that I exaggerated badly. So I guess I'm going to say sorry, and you can do it in your own free time. What you want to remember, which one word you would use to sum up what you have, what you learned today. I hope it's not, and I hope that it's not nothing. So something you already knew about formative assessment. Did you have perhaps an aha moment here today? So thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for my time management.
Carolina, thank you very much. Lots of questions in the chat box. If the recording is being made, I want to assure all the participants that this webinar is being recorded, and by the end of the week or no later than next week, every participant will receive the link to the recording so that they can Watch it again and again, because the number of ideas and techniques you shared today is really amazing. I personally had lots of aha moments.
Ah, thank you. This is nice. This is nice. And just if I may, like my absolutely last comment, and I promise, we talked with Ina before, you know, I know exaggerated with time, and but I still need to say it. We talked with Ina before the session, and I know how difficult a situation you are now facing. So I really wish you good luck and all the best. And I guess just, you know, keeping common sense, this will be the only thing that the only advice that I can, let's not go crazy about it. And whatever the circumstances, you're all doing a great job, I guess. So this is the only thing that I can say. Good luck in the new school year.